I used to be a $5,000 a night escort, but I fell madly in love with a socially awkward guy who loves to play video games. Sex workers, have you ever become emotionally attached to one of your clients? I met my wife at a strip club that she was stripping at. I came in with some of my friends and I saw this beautiful blonde that was making her rounds on the stages around the club. I still think this is crazy, but in my head I was like, wow, she is so confident and pretty. I have to get to dance from her. I patiently waited for her to finish her stage set. I approached her and asked if she would like to do a private dance. She never danced for me once. She just sat on my lap and we talked for hours in the back of the club about our lives and what we like to do. We had this connection that I never felt with any woman I had met in my life. When the lights turned on and it was time for everyone to leave, I pulled out my wallet to pay her. She declined to take any of my money. She gave me her number and we met up for a date the next weekend. We have been married for 5 years now. I never thought or expected to meet my wife at a strip club. She quit stripping a few months into our relationship and went back to school. Now we both have great jobs and a stable life. We have both changed each other's lives in positive ways and I love her with all of my heart. I've definitely been attracted and started to get emotionally attached to clients before, but will always take a step back before I get in too deep. Part-time cam girl and escort, so I can get away with not going on for a week or skipping a date or two just to regroup and remind myself of the situation. I have also got past clients who are now friends, who I am very much so emotionally attached to. It's kinda weird to think back and realize we met through sex work, honestly. Former sex worker here. I fell in love with a client. He looked kind of rockabilly and had heaps of tattoos. He'd bring me coffee and we'd talk about books and music. He made me a playlist of his favorite songs and brought me a copy of his favorite book. We swapped real names and talked honestly about life and relationships. One night we met up in a bar and he hung out with my friends. Stayed out all night and he crashed at mine. We were together for about 2 years. I quit sex work and went back to university. Got a normal job. We moved in together. My family adored him and I got along really well with his mother. We broke up for pretty normal reasons. I wanted a responsible partner who I could build a life with, save money, be fit and healthy. He wanted to tour with the band, drink and party. Last time I saw him he was in and out of rehab and in some volatile relationship. I saw his mother last year and his business had failed. He hadn't been sticking with rehab and he was being charged with assaulting his ex-girlfriend. I really hope he manages to deal with his problems and get clean. I'm still thankful for the time we had and don't hold any grudges. I'm a male gay for pay sex worker. I've never fell for any of my male clients. Never had a female client before. That is a unicorn in this business. Although I never fell for any clients, I did have deep respect for some of them. I would genuinely enjoy seeing and catching up. When I got close enough to some of these clients, we would just hang out, watch TV and have deep conversation, maybe with their head in my lap. Easy $400 tax free. One thing I realized is that men crave physical affection. I'm not talking about sex, but holding, hugging, etc. Some would tell me no one has ever held them in their 30 to 60 years of life. When I started holding or hugging clients after any sexual activity, it boosted recurring clients by 50%. Most of my clients now are non-sexual because of this. It feels amazing to be paid to connect with people on an intimate level. I actually used to be and met my now husband. We met through an appointment and we clicked. As lame as that sounds. We spent the next 3 days together and decided we both had feelings for each other. I honestly was ready to move on to a new career path at that point anyways, but we started dating. I quit my profession, moved in together and have now been married 2 years. Best decision I've ever made and we couldn't be happier. I worked for a brothel once, not as a sex worker, but as a designer and art director, and went to interview the women that worked there for a photo shoot, discussing outfits, how comfortable they were with showing their bodies and face etc. And there was one that I really had fun talking to. I was excited to work with her on the shoot. She had a bubbly personality and I knew it would work great on camera. When the shooting day came, she was absent. Turns out she had a regular that had asked her to marry him, and she said yes. I used to be a $5,000 a night escort, but I fell madly in love with a socially awkward guy who loves to smoke weed and play video games. And now I couldn't be happier. Now instead of going out I stay in and feed my boyfriend pizza rolls while we watch anime together. I'm the luckiest girl in the world. I dabbled on the cam sites one day and met a woman who worked there. We talked for a while and became friends. She invited me to take a vacation and stay at her place. She was married but we hooked up anyway. After a few days, I extended my vacation and we started doing couples shows together. One of our regulars was a 50-year-old woman with a plastic surgery addiction. She was pretty attractive for her age. After a few weeks of tipping, I shot her my number in a private message and we started texting. Eventually my co-performer and I called it quits and I ended up connecting with Cougar Client. For a while, we had a sugar relationship. It was weird because her daughter was my age and she was totally fine bringing her around me. But the Cougar Client gave me more money than I ever had and took me to places I could never afford. As time went on, I'd spend the night at her house and start doing things like cooking for her and her daughter and helping out with little chores. One day, I was there while Cougar Client was working from home. Her daughter was also there and going through stress with her father. At one point, she starts telling me about it and out of my mouth came these words of encouragement and a fatherly hug. I was creeped the hell out and realized I was in my early 20s and this wasn't just a sugar relationship anymore. And I actually cared about these two in some familial way. I was creeped the hell out that I was playing stepfather to a young woman I'd swipe right on, if Tinder was a thing back then. For a while I hung out at a bar where sex workers hung out. I ended up becoming a regular client of one woman. Her and I ended up seeing each other every day and just spending tons of time together. After a couple weeks, we started seriously dating, and then a full-blown relationship. She continued working but cut her schedule down a lot. We eventually got engaged and had one of the most epic engagement parties ever. She got pregnant and we were expecting to have a child. It turned out that it wasn't mine but one of her clients, which I would have been cool with since that stuff happens. But instead of talking to me about it, she flipped poop on me and ran away. She reached back out to me just before having the kid, and we stayed friends for a while. The only thing she asked me to do was sign the birth certificate and not tell her daughter or family about her past. I did. She never expected me to pay child support or help raise her daughter, which was fine with me, but if anything happens to my ex-fiancé, I might be responsible for a teenage girl. I used to do sex work, and I am still friends with some of those I met. So much so I use the guest room of the one couple when traveling. One guy about 5 years ago even paid for all my scuba training and equipment. Lovely man but he moved for a new work positions. I had a day job but it was contract work and they never wanted to hire to avoid paying benefits. I am now a cam model and prefer this way more. I have a regular on there who is apologizing profusely for not being able to tip as their dog got injured and his vet bills. I told no need to apologize and I have checked in with him every couple days to hear the dog's progress. Because animals are important to me. Our pets are our family. I do morning coffee on cam too. I do love my life. On some level I think you have to care about the people you see often, because without these people I wouldn't be where I am today. I had a bad childhood and luckily I got out. In the beginning it was survival sex work, but now that I am cam modeling and doing fetish education work, I am able to build an audience and following to educate and show off. I talk about sex safety and knowing risk, playing smart all the time. People can do whatever they want with their body if it doesn't harm another being, in my opinion. I just want people to have their fun and minimize risk as much as possible. I luckily wrapped up that kind of life, with no lifelong illnesses. Thank you PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, for reducing risk of contracting HIV and playing smart. Now that I do cam, no risk to me or any future partners. Friend of a former sex worker. She had severe emotional attachment issues and that's what led her to sex work in the first place. She got emotionally attached to many clients, none of whom even treated her well. She says that if I hadn't made her cut contact with them and stay with me while she got help, she probably would have married one of them and pumped out babies for an abusive husband. I'm not going to get into whether sex work is right or wrong. It's important to realize though that, the way it is now, it draws in very vulnerable people with deep-seated issues. I'm not saying everyone is like that but it does appeal to people who confuse physical intimacy for emotional intimacy. Former sex worker. I became completely infatuated with this man who would come into the strip club I worked at. I actually never let him pay me because being around him never felt like work. He would buy me gifts though and offered to pay my tuition. I said no. He was the first person to ever give me an orgasm and was the only person I met at that club that I did anything more than dance with. We texted each other regularly and were basically just having an affair. I was around 20 at the time. He was around 51. Eventually I quit my job, threw my cell phone in the garbage while on vacation and ghosted him. I remember him pretty fondly and think about him sometimes even though he was pretty shady. I haven't spoken to him in years, but I ran into his daughter at a networking event a few months ago. The industry we work in is a fairly small and gossipy community and I really hope I don't have to awkwardly work with her in the future. Not a sex worker, but I once met this girl online. She had a beautiful voice and I felt instantly attracted to her. We met through a friend. I hosted my own TeamSpeak server at the time and he would frequently use it with whoever he was gaming with. She was very impressed with the fact that I ran the server for some reason and we started talking. After a few months of hanging out online I finally got up the courage to ask her out. Turned out that she lived about 7 hours away, so I drove out there and picked her up for a concert. I got there and instantly there were sparks. She was turned on by my car as well and as a car guy that was a big plus for me. We kept visiting each other and eventually she moved in with me. I became emotionally attached to her and we eventually got married. Stripper here. I met my current partner at work. The night we met, I was informed by one of the waitresses I should chat with this guy who was fairly regular at the club. He'll give you money just for talking to him. I found him chatting and smoking a cigarette with another stripper that I'm good friends with so I didn't feel awkward invading. We all talk, he slides some ones in my G-string. Admittedly I didn't give him too much credit at our first meeting, as my first impression was that he was way too full of himself. This proved to be true, but with good reason. We talked and he followed me to watch my stage set. I had his attention and he made it rain on your girl. The rest of the night we talked about music and style. He has a lot of it as a fashion major. He scored major points with me. At the end of the night I gave him my number. Our first date, after much texting and flirting via social media, we agreed to meet for coffee. He's a lot more relaxed. He was so much more endearing when it was just the two of us. He gives me a quartz crystal which warms my witch heart. Our date goes way too long because we can't stop talking. He missed a meeting and I'm late for a doctor's appointment. Our date ends with a water fight, spitting water at each other in the parking lot, to the horror of the other coffee shop patrons. Eventually we move in together. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS, my little ice cream sandwiches. Hit the subscribe button and activate the bell notification for more videos like this. If you ever need to justify going to a strip club, just tell your mum. I might meet my significant other there. If that isn't a good reason then I don't know what is.